Good morning. It's our favorite day of the week. It's Data Day. I couldn't wait for this day. It's always something that brings so much value, and we have so much to unpack with you guys today. This is Sales Chatter, the logistics podcast where we aim to help 10,000 reps hit a million GP. I'm your co host, Ryan Mohammed. With me is my good friend, President CEO of RGTX Logistics Solutions, Bodacious Cowboy, Jeff Dickinson. How you doing this morning, brother?
Good, my man. How you doing? It is Hump Day, and it is one of the best days of the week because it is Data Day with our good friend Dean Croke. Westport wipeout diving 42% year over year, 33% month over month, 28% below COVID levels. Let's get into this, man. Unbelievable.
Let's go.
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
And like we said, we have so much to unpack this morning. So want to welcome Dean, Freight Principal Analyst at TAT Freight Analytics. So happy to have you this morning, Dean. How's it going this morning?
Yeah, good. Good to be with you.
It just feels like that background there, I'm loving it. Feels like we're getting a little bit of spring weather. Jeff's Corvette will be in the back of that landscape. But how's your week been?
Yeah, good. A lot of people think this is just what do you call that? Fake background you put in, but it's actually a real mural of a highway scene. You can see the sunset there. One of my favorite times of the day to drive into the west. Good week. Preparing for Mid-America Truck Show. A quick trip up to New Hampshire Peterbilt this morning to get some parts for the truck. And they open at 6:30 a.m. So I was up there. I was just sort of watching a few truckers go and thinking, it's sunrise and they've already done their first delivery. Like it's a lot of people don't realize that's just the start of a 12-hour day for a lot of truckers, especially a lot of the regional guys. So
yeah, be happy that you have parts.
Yeah, I didn't have to buy much, but I was lucky I had them. But I was there at the Peterbilt. They had an engine for sale, a big X15, 600 horsepower, and it had the word exchange on it. So it was bright red, and it was 11/29/22 build date. So it's virtually new, and it was going on sale for $48,000 for a truck engine. And a lot of people don't realize what it costs to run a truck. And this is what we've been talking about on the show, because if you have bought an overpriced used truck and you've got to do an engine rebuild or put a new engine in it, you could easily be dropping 30 grand into it. And on current rates, they're not making near enough to put enough aside for that. So my week's been an interesting week getting ready for Mid-America Truck Show. I see Brandy's going to be there. Yep. I'll be driving down on Friday, be there Saturday night late and getting the truck ready. Take me 3 or 4 days to get it ready. It's in the shop getting clay barred and waxed right now, but it'll rain 5 times between now and Louisville, so we'll have to wash it again.
Always. Every time you wash your vehicle, it freaking rains or it snows.
Yeah.
It's a gimme.
Yeah. No, Daman, that didn't include install or any of the piping and plumbing. So if you could get it installed, it's probably 48. You might drop another 12 grand by the time you get that bad boy in. But it's the wrong color. It has to be yellow. Like if it's not a Caterpillar, I'm not interested. So
I love that. It's amazing to kind of see. So, we want to talk about carrier viability today. I think it's just really important, as Jeff was kind of talking at the beginning about the imports and so on. Dean, what can you tell us of what's going on?
Yeah, the imports are a big part of it because it sort of contributes to the overall lack of volume in the market. So does, the data point that we talked about on the show probably last month was Jason Miller did a great post about furniture imports were down. And of course, furniture imports are one of our biggest imports, so that adds to it. But why are furniture imports down? Well, we're not building as much, not doing as much home remodeling because the pandemic's kind of passed. We're past that phase. But we're also not building as many homes because of higher interest rates. So there's not as many single-family homes being built. So there's less lumber to haul. There's less plywood, less dimension framing lumber, fewer loads of shingles, and of course, fewer loads of washing machines and appliances that fill those homes. So a lot of our fortunes in trucking are in fact tied to the housing market and indirectly to the import market, which is affecting a lot of our truckload volume. So it's leading to this period of lower demand, although lower is probably the wrong word. Most of the data points we're looking at, Jason Miller's truckload ton mile index, CAS, shiplets, although that's got a bit of LTL in it, mostly flat to sideways. The word sideways has been used a few times in terms of the direction of truckload volume. So, and I think that's a good thing. If we're in the slowest quarter of the year and volumes are still going sideways in truckload, and we're picking up a bit of volume from intermodal, so that's a good thing for truckload carriers. But we've still got many, many more trucks in the market than we have loads, especially in the spot market. So that's puts your deflationary pressure on rates, and that sort of led me to building. I'll call it an index. Index is probably the wrong word, but I built an index. I went back to the start of 2020 and had a look at what it costs to operate a truck. And then I made adjustments for wages and other operating costs and fuel along the way. And if you want to throw up that chart, Ryan, we can have a look at it because I think it really tells the story. The other one, if you can. Yeah. The other one is so the green line is what it costs to run this is an interstate 100,000 miles a year, and you're a long haul trucker and you're working in the spot market primarily. So it's sort of the carrier that's the most vulnerable, has exposure to volatility in the market. So the green line is the operating costs. Operating costs range from $1.67 on the left all the way through to $1.84 on the right. They were as high as just over $2 a mile. I think we got to about 208 was about the highest. It was at that point in time. That's when diesel was its highest. So a little bit of movement there. The blue line is the all-in dry van spot rate, which you can see has gone from $1.88 back in January 2020 down to $2.28 today. So we're nowhere near where we started 2020. But rates have come down substantially. But focus on the red line. So when I look at the gross revenue that my truck generates based on the blue line, and then I subtract my operating costs on the green line, I end up with this gap above the green line and the red line, which is essentially gross profit. It's a gross profit rate per mile. And the gross profit ranged from, I think it was as high as $1 a mile. It got up to about $1.03 a mile was the peak of profitability. And that was January 22. And then, of course, the wheels literally fell off the market then. Rates dropped, diesel prices went up when Russia invaded the Ukraine, and the market, profitability kind of dropped dramatically. But just focus on the area above green and below red, because that is a period of incredible profitability for carriers. If you've been following all the earnings calls from the large truckload carriers, they were all reporting record levels of income and revenue and gross profit margins. That's that area in between there from June of 20 all the way through until basically May of last year. That area in there was an incredible period of profitability that gave carriers a lot of runway to absorb a lot of the higher operating costs into 2022. And if you look at that average, that was almost a 2-year period, not quite 2 years. They averaged about 57 cents a mile gross profit. So gross profit means, fuel was 70 cents a mile, wages were 64 cents a mile, maintenance was 14 cents a mile. All of my operating costs are in there. Yes, Daman, everything in my operating costs include everything to run that truck down the road, including the driver wage. So the 57 cents a mile average is over and above that. And this is sort of the average spot rate carrier that was running in the DAT network. But since June of last year, when diesel prices skyrocketed, by June last year, diesel was up to $5.80. Rates had dropped 50 cents a mile year to date. The average since then has been about 33 cents a mile. So you can see that if you go sort of follow the green line and the red line, you can see how they kind of bounce around a bit from May, June last year was a period when we saw a lot of carriers exit the industry, which you'll see on the next chart. And then profitability came back a bit as rates went up a little bit, then came down. They've come down again. There was an October, November surge in carrier exits, which we'll see on the next chart. I'll just hold it here for the moment, Ryan. So what you can see is that the red vertical error bars are plus or minus 10 cents per mile on the red line. So you can see when the high, the high part of the error bar is below green, that's when carriers are operating, fairly significantly below operating levels. So that's where we're at right now. Carriers are getting by. They're not making a lot of profit. Diesel would need to be at $4, and rates would need to be back up around $2 to be breaking even. Carriers are getting by. They're paying themselves. The average net income last year was $64,000 a year, according to Todd Amon at ATBS. That's down about $8,000 a year. Some carriers, though, are obviously drawing a lot less. To break even right now, if it's costing me $1.80, if it's costing me, let's say, what's my operating cost today? It's costing me $1.90 today. To break even, basically, carriers have to give themselves a pay cut of about a half. So they'd have to drop a $64,000 salary to about $35,000, and they would still be at break even. And I think that's the strategy a lot of them are employing. They're not drawing as much wage. They're not making as much profit. They're sort of cutting a few corners just to keep the wheels turning. So that's where we are right now. I think we're over the worst of it from a carrier exit point of view, because rates will start to go back up, even though they're still searching for a floor, and diesel prices are still coming down. As the EIA predicted, they're looking at about $4 a gallon by the midsummer. So that's sort of a viability chart. But I think the important thing here is that gap. One of the reasons we've seen so many carriers join the industry, and if you want to show the next chart, Ryan, you'll see a similar shape right in the middle there where that black line gets really high. And the green are the new entrants each month that need a DOT number, and the red are the carriers that are exiting and getting rid of their authorities. And the black is the difference. And you can see up until June of 19, we're adding about 1,000 net new carriers a month. Then we had the record quarter of bankruptcies in the June period of 2019. And then that black line starts to go up at about the same time that spot rates, that profitability on the previous chart went up. Rates started to soar. Diesel prices dropped to fairly low levels. We were adding as much as 8,000 net new carriers a month on the interstate section of the industry in about, I think it was June of 21. And then if you remember, I mentioned a little while ago that in May and June, you can see, well, you can't really see it, but in May and June, there was a steep drop off. There was more carriers leaving than coming in. And then again in October, November, to the right of that chart, when that black line dips below red, that was that on the prior chart where we had negative profitability. Carriers were running below break even. As of the third week of March, we are seeing fewer carriers leave. It's almost back to a net zero number where it's the same number of carriers reactivating their authorities versus carriers deactivating their authorities. We'll have more data by the end of this week, but the exodus in terms of carriers out of the industry certainly been flatlining, and if this trend holds, we could be seeing, carrier capacity start to shift and come back into the spot market. But there's a lot of things got to happen. Most importantly, diesel's got to keep coming down, and spot rates have got to find a bottom and start going back up. And neither of those are certain just yet. That's a long.
Well, that's awesome. One gets Damon's question here, where we kind of brings up, imagine how many employees would stay in the business if they were asked to take a 50% pay cut.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Right.
Yep. Absolutely great. Yeah, that's so. Yeah, that's been one of the things people have said is how are carriers getting by? And of course, if you've already leasing a few vehicles and your business and part of your home and all of that is around running your business. You can get by, but what you're not, and the reason I mentioned the $48,000 engine is this: if you're not getting a return on the equity in your business in your rate per mile, and by that I mean not just to break even on your operating costs, but if you've got 50 grand in that truck, that 50 grand could be earning what in a bank? Then convert that into $1 per mile or cents per mile. So your return on equity is one of the things I see a lot of fleets, they don't factor into their operating costs. And what that means is you're not generating enough profit to pay for that engine, or more importantly, when that truck wears out, you haven't got enough equity in the business to buy a newer truck. You're always trading down. And that's so if carriers are doing that now, that they're going to pay the price for doing that in a year or so. That's the problem. So it's a dangerous game to play, and the hope is that the engine doesn't fail. You can get by with almost anything else breaking, but you blow a transmission. Well, you can throw one in pretty quick. You can drop them in and out, on the side of the road if you had to, if you're strong enough, or you've got someone with a pallet or a jack. But an engine is a whole different thing. Remember we talked about my good friend from Nova Scotia last year. He blew an X15 Cummins engine. By the time he got it towed and put back in the truck, it was 85 grand. And he had to refinance the truck. It's a big Peterbilt, long haul truck. So that's the downside of where rates are right now. Carriers are getting by. They're certainly not going out the back door. And the data point that Todd Amon shared on our IQ show yesterday that blew me away was that miles were down 11% year over year in 2022. Normally, when times are tough, miles go up. You run more miles to make more revenue per truck week. They're going down. So rates are down and miles are down. And to him, who's been in this business for decades, it's really perplexing. And he offered a couple of ideas. One was trucks are spending less time on the road because of more delays at shippers, unloading and loading, more delays in workshops where they're starved for mechanics. You're spending more time getting repairs done. Drivers are spending more time at home because they never made more money. So he offered some really interesting answers to why that might be the case. But it's an interesting trend. So carriers are doing less miles, they're making less money, but they are getting by in the spot market. Very different for the contract carriers, though. They're still getting by quite well, I think, although the outlook is a little bit less certain. But they've certainly had a good 18-month period.
Yeah, another thing that comes up regarding that is also customers, shippers reevaluating their network and looking at their customer base and doing a network redesign and getting closer to them. Thus, the average length of haul is going to shrink if they put the right inventory at the right place at the right time. I could see that also being part of that for the reason of those miles going down, besides what you said, because, a lot of shippers out there, they're trying to get a little bit smarter in this crisis, if you want to call it that. And so they're trying to get closer to, their end user by shifting their inventory and getting it into those right areas. And, it's going to affect those miles for sure.
Yeah. So the only other caveat I'd like to put out there, because I'm watching some of the comments, when it comes to operating costs, there is no right answer. So there is no right number. Every truck is different. You can have two trucks the same spec with different drivers. They are going to produce different operating costs. So every truck has a different operating cost. There is no right answer. My numbers are based on a fairly typical owner-operator in the spot market running 100,000 miles a year, 15,000 miles empty, average insurance, rates, no accidents the last 5 years. Fairly typical representative of DAT's spot market carrier. But operating costs, as Todd said on our show, operating costs for a new entrant in the industry, you could add 25 cents a mile to my numbers, and they're looking for a much higher rate per mile. So for someone that's new to the industry with a used truck they paid a lot for and paid a lot for insurance, my $1.90 could easily be $2.20 a mile for them. And if you're thinking about $1.70 a mile as a national average, you're 50 cents a mile short. So you've got to be very careful about where you run, what sort of miles per day you work on, what your revenue per day looks like, because that's when you've really got to be careful for those carriers. And I think they've been the ones that have been suffering in the last little while.
Yeah, one of the things that come back to me, and going back a few decades, is when St. Johnsbury closed their facility and didn't tell anybody, and all those shipments on their docks, and they closed up, locked everything down, couldn't make the shipments for 6 months. That's a fear of mine, depending on how financially sound these carriers are out there and whether or not we really have the right information regarding that.
Yeah. When you go cheap, right, you're always going to have a service issue. And I think some shippers have been doing that, right? They've been chasing that spot market down. I understand the logic, but there's a compromise you have to make when it comes to service and reliability. I passed a carrier this morning coming back from New Hampshire, and it was an old Freightliner Classic that was kind of held together by duct tape. Literally, there was duct tape holding some of the side fairings on the truck. But he had a flatbed on, and the load was tarped, but the straps were over the tarps. Not one single one of the 8 straps were tight. Some were actually flapping really loosely. Now, I couldn't see he had any straps underneath the tarp, and there were certainly no chains. But that's the sort, when people are getting by, on a shoestring budget, they cut corners, and you just got to go out on the highways and see it. We went through this in 2018, 2019. This shouldn't be anything new to anybody. I think the difference this time around is, and again, Todd Amon said it on our show, he has never in his history, remember, he owned a big truckload carrier business out west before he started ATBS. He said he has never in his history seen carriers just sit it out for 3 months like they did last year in the early part of last year. Just park their trucks. And the reason is they had such a profitable 2021, 2022 period. Record profits. And that's what was missed by all the people talking about bloodbaths, was that carriers not only made a lot of revenue per mile, they made a lot of money selling used assets, because truck prices, as Daman said, went from 180 to 240K. So truck prices are still fairly high. So a lot of people made money by selling used trucks and trailers, and maybe selling some property. But they also made a lot of money on the revenue side of their business. So just some extraordinary things coming out the back end of the pandemic as we sort of look for normalization in the market in 2023. I wasn't quick enough to make the internet joke there because Jeff went away and came back.
I know.
I was getting ready.
Yes, there is. Well, it's pretty awesome to kind of say about that, and I want to actually give two points. Yesterday in my prospecting, I was talking to brand new prospects that I've been like kind of talking, having a relationship with the past 6 months, and I asked them straight up, like I asked them about the spot market. Would you not look at getting cheaper rates for what you're kind of doing and things like that? And both of them actually said no. Like we're good. We're contracted from our guys from I think it was October. We finalized our RFP. We're rolling with these guys, so they're not even looking for that cost savings aspect of it, because that can be. There's always a way to kind of get in as a broker to kind of talk to somebody, but kind of push that. And another thing I want to bring up when you kind of said home furniture when it comes to Jason Miller. I saw that earlier this week that Foot Locker is actually going to close down 400 stores in the next 2 years, right? And I think about the warehousing that we always talk about. Obviously, they're going to go to e-commerce. We got Nordstrom, who's leaving the Canadian market completely. So you have all these retail places. And the way that I think of it is that malls are going to be obsolete. Thank Amazon for that. But we're going to see condos come up, at least in those places. But what can you talk a little bit more on like the warehousing side? Because, hey, 400 stores for Foot Locker, and you got to remember, Foot Locker owns Champs as well, right? So, and East Bay, which is a company, a apparel company they own as well. So, let's say you want to get those brand new shiny Nikes, you're gonna have to order them online. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Just driving around, and Jeff can jump in on this because he's got a good handle on it, in some parts of the country. But as I drive around, I'm not seeing any vacant, new warehouses. Like everything is still full on. When I was on 65 the other day in Indianapolis, out through Harrisburg, Carlisle, I'll be down there on Friday. There will be so many warehouses being built and construction activity that's ongoing. So I think there's a lot more going on in Phoenix. We talked about the Phoenix market has been growing rapidly. I think you raise a really interesting point, Ryan, and I hadn't thought about the shift from bricks and mortar to e-commerce, because presumably that same product gets stored in a warehouse at some point. It just doesn't go to the final mile piece to the retail outlet. So you've still got a centralized warehouse function for a lot of that import goods that'll have to go into those warehouse markets. So we sort of hypothesized a few weeks ago that there'd be a glut of warehouse space. I could be totally wrong on that. It feels like we're building too much, but I just don't know where the volume comes from to fit it all. That's my take on this. But right now, we're not seeing any signs of it.
Yeah, and you could go back to the last 10 years of posts that I put out there, and I called it about the brick and mortars. I just didn't see that. And I think the pandemic was the big shift in that, because people learned to go on the internet and start buying that way. There's a huge difference between men and women are the touchy-feely, and you like to wear and try the dress on, but the guys just buy, and they just, it is what it is, sort of speaking. But we're seeing that, and there's a huge mall in America. I forgot the name of it. To Ryan's point, that they're thinking about creating places for the homeless instead of tearing it down, building little condos and stuff. But I and you can go back 10 years. I've been preaching this. I don't think that brick and mortars are going to be something of the future. I see all these huge warehouses all the way around in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania, and Brignansville, Pennsylvania. I mean, all over the place. In central New Jersey, they're still building down there, and they're full still. I mean, you see all these trailers that are parked in there, and there's business all the time coming out of there. So I don't think it is. And think about all the overhead to keep these brick and mortars open, staff, and they don't have any warehousing space. So their trailer that's delivering is the rolling warehouse, and they get multiple deliveries every single day. You got the inside delivery, everything like that. It's all cost effective. You can see that shrinking away to bring more money back to the bottom line. If I had something like that, I would do that too. It just seems, the right thing to do to save money. So yeah, I believe, that we're going to see more and more of that. And remember, I said, I don't know, about a month or so ago, that I forgot the article, but someone said that over the next 10 years, we need another 1 billion square feet of warehouse space.
So think about this. Remember Arc Best came out a few weeks ago and promoted their new, and I'm going to forget the name of it, but it's a flat, like a transy flat, like a flat rack that you preload and you slide it into the trailer.
Yeah, it's like the slip sheets.
So it's a whole thing that you push in and pull out with a forklift, and then you unload and load from side. Great concept. You could put two 26s in a 53, and it'll probably work instead of the 28. Story for another day. But the feedback I got when I made the post on LinkedIn or on Instagram was, that's great for a new warehouse, but that won't work in all the old LTL warehouses. And it got me thinking about, while you were talking, Jeff, you think about all of the warehouses in, say, a crowded New Jersey, Newark area that haven't got space. So, and then you think about all of the new warehouses, because of labor shortages, are going to automations and robotics. And you need, we talked about this on the show a while ago, 1 million square foot warehouses. I think the number was like a minimum of 20 million for robotics to pick and pack. So I think a lot of people are building new warehouses, but going more towards automation because of labor issues. Maybe that's the perception. Whether that's real or not, I don't know in those areas. But that would certainly generate a lot of commercial warehouse activity that we're seeing, would be the adoption of automation and scale for all of this e-commerce, as opposed to the older ones that are small and hard to get in and out of in the cities.
Yeah, and to your point as well, because I worked in warehouses in DCs for a very long time. The other issue that I see happening is the staging areas on the dock. Now you're talking about these big items that don't fold down, right? Plus you have to buy a clamp that goes onto your forklift that lifts these sleds up so you can go in and out.
Yeah.
It's going to have that amount of space to put that in storage. Either ArcBest is going to have the whole contract and they have that facility, and I could see that happening. That's the only carrier they use. Let's just stage them up and we'll label them North Carolina, Virginia, whatever it is, and we put all loads in there and out we go, right? But that's not realistic. That's not going to happen. So what do you do with that critical dock space? You're talking about inefficiencies, lack of productivity, because you're going to have to go around them and maneuver and do all the stuff. So I don't see it. I understand it. I think it's a great idea, but I just don't think it being fluid enough.
Right. Yep.
That's awesome to kind of see. And another thing, just to add to that fact about like brick and mortars going out of, is that we're not really talking too much about inflation. Like everyone complains about their grocery
No.
bill at the end of the day, but I know in our area in Toronto, like we're a very wealthy city. Like we're one of the wealthiest
Mhm.
cities out there, and people are still kind of struggling. You know, people are not spending times. Like you go to the movies, people, it's kind of like an empty place. People will spend on things like concerts and things like that. Those once in a while lifetimes. Let's say a band comes to Toronto, something like that. But you see, like those spa days are not really happening so much, or those things to like self-care where they can kind of cut for themselves. And you look at those subscription-based services like Netflix and different things like that. People just can't afford like the new stuff that's coming out. So I kind of see, like as Daman kind of says, in our local malls here, they're ghost towns. There's really nothing for lease, for sale, and then you'll see a bubble tea place come up, and then they'll be gone in 3 months, and then you'll see another place. You'll probably see one spot. But with that being said, that has opened the opportunity for pop-up malls, and I think that's one of the best ideas ever.
So that's an interesting point. Exactly.
Yeah. So you have like companies, like a small business, they'll rent out that space for maybe a weekend, and then another place, or you just have one big place and then have multiple people just rent out of it. So I think it's pretty cool to talk about.
The other thing I've seen are sort of mini strip malls built around some boutique brands. We've got one near us that's not a mall, but it's like maybe 30 shops. You can drive in, park quickly. You've got everything from Tommy Bahama to Coles to CVS. Like it's a really interesting concept, but it's not a mall. So I'm seeing more and more of that.
Yeah, a lot of shops. Another point I wanted to get into. Do we want to talk a little bit about the what kind of happened yesterday? Because I know you're talking about the carrier viability in terms of Night Swift and US Express. That's definitely a big one that everyone was kind of talking about. For us here, Dean, because I know this is something that you guys take very seriously. What is the impact going to be like to brokers like myself out there?
I don't know that it'll be much. I don't know. I mean, I think you're going to end up with a massive carrier, like it'll truly be a mega carrier, but it'll be incredibly well run. I mean, the Knight, David Jackson that runs Knight, and Kevin Knight, like incredibly price disciplined. They know how to run a trucking business, and they've done really good things since they acquired Swift. So I would, I saw that as a real positive for truckload carriers in general, because of the experience they bring to the market. So I looked at that as all upside. I don't know what was going on at US Express beyond what they report in the media or in their quarterly earnings call, but I just see this as being a big plus for brokers. It potentially, you've got to have the same amount of capacity available, but in one brokerage shop. So Knight Swift have a big brokerage. They're a partner of DAT, as they are partners of a lot of folks that use third-party vendors, whether they be owner-operators or companies like ours. I think it's a good thing. They're very. One thing always struck me about the Knight business before it acquired Swift was it was always a very price disciplined, very good operating costs, very hands-on management style, but they ran dedicated lanes. They were very particular. I remember them saying to me at a meeting, they were very particular about the lanes they ran, a bit like Heartland's model, right? They have a very structured, disciplined approach to network balance, and they kind of didn't deviate out from that. And that's why you saw some of those mid-80s operating ratios for years at those two companies. And I think so. What the inference there is that if they're that disciplined, then maybe they let some of those less profitable, higher volatility, lower volume lanes go to the spot market. Maybe that's the angle, Ryan, that you're looking for. That's sort of how I think that will play out. But that's already a trend that's in play, as in more contract volume is going to the spot market. Not because of carriers, but because shippers are strategically putting more into the spot market to minimize their costs with as much lead time as they can get in that load.
Yep.
That's awesome to see. I've actually dealt with Knight in my show freight days. They were really good at that. They were actually a competitor. Like I was jealous. There's a wrestling company that I follow, and anytime they come to Toronto, it's always Knight trucks. So it's actually really, really cool to kind of see that.
Which one?
Yeah.
Which WWE?
No, AEW, All Elite.
Oh,
Let
okay.
me rest. And they're actually coming to Toronto. But it's actually cool to see tonight. So I would do like shows for like Cirque du Soleil, and then it would be my trucks, and then it would be
Right.
night trucks. And I was always jealous
Right.
because theirs were very
Right.
uniform
Yeah.
as they're kind of parked there. But Jeff, you
Yeah.
were mentioning earlier in the episode about the imports and Long Beach and all that fun stuff, which is your bread and butter. You're the king of that, my man, of giving that data. Can you talk a little bit more? Let's get into that conversation.
Yep.
Yeah, I love reading up on that, and it seems that it's still plunging. Dean shared a graph with us last week about the truckload rates as well, and we saw that little bump, Dean, coming down, and it looks like it's going to cross over the 2019, that orange line, and I don't know about that as far as if it's going to dive more. We were discussing whether or not the bottom has been reached, but the direction of that graph, it's not
healthy. Well, not healthy for carriers.
Yeah, it's not welcoming. And now you look at the plummeting market out on the West Coast at 41% year over year, 33% month over month. I mean, that's devastating when you think about that. I mean, it's great for the East Coast and the Gulf Coast ports that are flourishing. I wouldn't say flourishing, but they're up and they're taking the majority of that of those imports. And I don't know if they can recoup from that.
I think
Mr. Corker said that, don't worry, we'll get the thing going. It's going to happen. But I don't see, man, this trend is a bad trend. I don't know if it rebound. I'd love to get your thoughts on that thing. But I don't see it rebounding anytime too soon.
Not particularly not this year, because the ILWU, labor agreement discussions are still ongoing. I think a lot of damage has been done. Shippers have rightly, been spooked by that, and they've sent a lot of their sort of, I'm going to say discretionary imports that they could afford to ship to other ports. They've done that. The shift in share, I was just looking at it between 2022 and last year, and 2023 now. So for February just gone, East Coast is 48% of imports, was 45. So they picked up 3 points in the space of a year. West Coast was 46% last year, down to 40%. Gulf Coast was 8, is now 11%. So the Gulf Coast and the East Coast have picked up a significant amount of volume. It used to be always that Long Beach and Los Angeles represented the majority of imports into the country, just those two ports alone. That's no longer the case. So we've seen a pretty big shift. The data point that jumped out from me in February, Jeff, was that even though all volumes are down everywhere, down less on the East Coast, but on the Gulf Coast they're flat. Now I think that's a function of a lot of volume shifted away from the East Coast to the Gulf Coast, Houston, Mobile, New Orleans. But because volumes are coming down nationally, we're comparing February to February last year, where their volumes were up substantially. So 0% year over year on the Gulf Coast is an interesting data point, because we are, both our dry van, reefer, and flatbed, all of our equipment types are seeing very strong truckload volumes in the state of Texas. And and two areas. One is the import on the port side, but also across the southern border in Laredo and McAllen, El Paso. Seeing a lot of volume come across those markets. So Texas is a very healthy state. It's a direct beneficiary, I think, of the shift in imports. And to your point, I think the data point we shared last week about a lot of empty 53-foot intermodal boxes sitting around Los Angeles. People are going to drive rates down, and my question to you guys would be: is if intermodal carriers drive down rates on 53-foot intermodal moves from Los Angeles to Chicago, does that then attract more carriers back to the West Coast because it's cheaper to get your freight inland? Is that a possibility?
I mean, that's a great question, but I mean, the way I look at it is that you gotta. I mean, if you're going to use an analogy, it's like you got a big piece of raw meat out there with a lot of lions that want to chew on that. And I'll tell you what, with all these imports being down and dray moves, it's diving. It's diving. I mean, when you're seeing, $4,500 rates going from coast to coast, even below that, I mean, it's pretty bad, when you're thinking at 2,700 miles and what these guys are making per mile. I mean, but what are you going to do on that? I mean, the shippers out there are very, very smart. They're in tune with it. They got their finger on the pulse, talk about service and rates and what they want to do. And then I have customers that say, you know what, I'm looking for capacity. I'm looking for consistency. So that takes that rate right out of the market because, it's notwithstanding, it's not sustainable because as soon as the market's going to change, if you have a contract with these carriers right now, they're jumping. They're going to jump like fleas, man. Like you would not believe it. They're going to jump right off that and they're going to go for the highest lane that they can possibly because they want to be profitable. So how do you fend that off? You feed them now and you feed them through the whole year with a decent rate, have that consistency and that capacity to cover all those lanes and you're in good shape. But man, riding that spot market the way that it is on the West Coast, man, I would not advise that at all. I mean, I think it's a very poor selection. I understand where you're going with this, but I just think in the long run, you're going to lose more than what you really realize.
So I just looked at our rates today on Los Angeles, Chicago on dry van, 2,025 miles, excluding fuel, was $262 this time a year ago. It's now exactly half at $130 a mile. For a truckload, that's that's when I just talked about operating costs of $1.90 a mile. Even when you add fuel back in and you think if you're getting all of the fuel recapture, you're still about 5 cents per mile below what it costs to run a truck on that lane. So contract rates on that lane though are sitting at about $226 today.
It's getting sucked down though. That stock market is pulling those contracted.
Well, that's exactly they were $346 a year ago. They're $226 today. So there's $120 they've dropped in the space of a year. Spot rates have dropped. They're dropped by $160 a mile. So yes, they have dragged down rates on that lane substantially. I mean, for those listening, why it's an important lane to watch. Think about the railroad industry. Half of all the rail cars that you see running around the country, half of them are intermodal. Give or take a few percentage points. Intermodal means 20 foot, 40 foot, 45 foot, 53 foot, 48 foot, right? So all of the different container permutations go on intermodal and trailer on flat car. So about half of the rail network is intermodal, but about 30% of intermodal moves move on Los Angeles, Chicago. Mm-hmm. So it's a really important lane to watch because to me it gets to where we started the show, which is about imports being down. Intermodal relies fairly heavily on what they call IIP, which is inland intermodal point, something like that. I hope Larry Gross will yell at me for getting that wrong. But it's the intermodal move, whether you're moving from Los Angeles to Seattle, Chicago, which is the majority, Kansas City, St. Louis, Dallas. A lot of volume moves off the West Coast inland. And then, of course, it generates all sorts of dray and truck moves out of there. So this is an important barometer for, I think, maybe just the health of the transport industry, rail and road. Mm-hmm. But it's one that I've been watching because if you think back a year ago, maybe 18 months, we were talking about rates on this lane of being even higher than they were a year ago. And in DAT's world, we were moving triple the volume we would normally move on that lane because the railroad network was overwhelmed with imports from Asia. Fast forward, 18 months to 2 years, and here we are with almost the worst case scenario playing out for carriers. Shippers, of course, would be thinking that's great. And I guess brokers sitting in the middle buying capacity cheap and having good margin expansion.
Here's the scary part. Here's the real scary part. I'm looking at it right now, okay? The worst case scenario was March in 2020 when they were doing the TEUs were about 460,000.
Yep.
I'm looking at the current graph right now, and for 2023 February, while we are below the mark of 2020 and we are moving towards the worst case scenario that we will be below 2020 results on TEUs if this continues to do that. And March right now, I mean, everything you see, everything you hear is saying that the bottom's dropping out. And so if this is true, this is bad, man. This is really bad.
So we are 1.77 million containers on the import side for February. In March of 2018, it was 1.791, so about the same, a little bit less. So March is the low point, first of all. So we're heading into the low point in terms of imports because of Chinese New Year. But I looked at the peak last year. So at the peak, remember we talked on the show about anytime imports get above 2 million TEU a month consistently, the US supply chain gets into trouble. So it was above 2 million for, I think, 27 months, I counted. So, but the peak, the biggest number of container imports was August last year at 2.658 million containers in August of last year. Last month, it was almost 1 million fewer per month. So when you take 1 million TEU out of, that's like a lot of volume. To Jeff's point, volumes have dropped 34% since May of last year. That's like, I don't know that, well, I haven't. If I go back to 2015 on my chart here, we've never seen anything like that.
No, we're treading in different lake right now. We're treading different lake.
We're sort of, we're heading back towards, we're certainly at 2019 levels and maybe 2018 levels in terms of imports. So February will be the low point, and then hopefully things start to pick back up from there. But that's what we've always said on the show here. This quarter will be quiet and quieter than most, and it's playing out pretty much exactly as we said.
Right there. Yep, absolutely. Yep. It will be interesting over the next couple of weeks, especially on the truckload rate per mile on that, because that graph, your last graph, that black trend mark is dipping, and it's like, oh, man.
And for those that are wondering what Jeff's talking about, it's on our DAT show, we show our year-over-year look at spot rates. If you go to dat.com/market update, you can download all those charts for free. It's all in our weekly report. But yes, it's you'll see them tracking. You'll see the black line, which is 2023, is tracking about 12 cents per mile above 2019. And we made I did, and Ken, my boss, we said like 8 months ago, oh, you'll never see 2019 rates again. And I'm thinking, oh boy, we're sailing close to the wind here. That could be one of the worst hot takes of all time if rates cross over 2019 levels. So I really don't want.
It may. I mean, it looks that way. And like I said, 3 to 4 more weeks of data.
Yeah,
you're going to have a very good data point there on whether or not that's going to hold true. And it looks like that. That sucks. But.
Well, as you'll know from listening to us, we're quick to admit when we're wrong. I've been wrong a few times. But what I will say, I've been, during the pandemic, it's been a fascinating period over the last 3 years. We've been right more often than most, and more often than we've been wrong, which I think is amazing when you consider the market volatility we've all been through. But it's important to, take in data from as many different sources as you can to make a balanced opinion.
That's it. Don't always rely on one data point. Like Dean said, go to other periodicals, read a lot of different articles, get some insights and perspectives from other analysts, and then try to draw a conclusion. And in most cases, they will draw the same conclusion from a different perspective, of course. So
I'm advocating for some sort of X-ray binoculars so I can see what's inside dry vans and reefers, because I can see what flatbedders are hauling. I know what's moving in the industrial economy. I have no clue what's inside dry vans, and it drives me nuts. I need to know that. So what site has the reports? Okay, so we could put that in there, B. It's dat.com/market update. If you go to the resources tab at dat.com, you'll see a section that says blog, and that'll be my weekly blog post. And then there'll be dry van, flatbed, and reefer equipment posts, and the charts are all in there. Gets published on Tuesday evenings. Thanks, Ryan, for dropping it in there.
Check it out.
Yeah, it's great stuff. It's something that I've kind of used to. And actually, one of the things that you did right, what I want to get into as we get close to the end of it, is Hollywood. Let's talk about CB radios. Let's talk about driver shortages. I was going to wear a tuxedo today because I thought we were going to start with the Hollywood thing, like the Oscars go award to. But what can you talk to us about the driver shortage, and why is Hollywood to blame?
Yeah, I'm real old school when it comes to trucking. CB radio is like should be a compulsory piece of equipment in a truck. And a lot of people talk about the driver shortage. And of course, you will know that I'm not a believer in the driver shortage. I think we have a driver retention problem. But there is a generational impact going on here, because my generation, the baby boom generation, we grew up in the 60s and 70s with Hollywood movies that glorified the over-the-road, larger-than-life trucker.
Yep.
And when you go through them, I mean, it started, when you saw a lot of those World War II army trucks surplus coming out into the market, a lot of people started trucking businesses then. One of the first movies was Thieves Highway in 1949, produce carrier running, I think it was Seattle, but they didn't have CB radios. And then you had that movie, Then Came Bronson, or that show starring Michael Parks. Yep. He was the biker. And it's sort of, there was this era of glorification of the open road in the US. We had Mad Max. We had Mad Max in Australia with Mel Gibson. Yep. That was sort of my first taste of trucking and Hollywood. But then when I wrote this piece, this blog post, what got me thinking about this is that there was a whole generation of truckers that joined the industry because of Hollywood movies. Mm-hmm. When you talk to folks, the whole CB, when the FAA allowed anybody to have a CB license, you didn't need a license. When they sort of opened it up, lots of car drivers had CB radios. So there's this massive growth in CB radios, which has largely gone away. But let me just rattle off some of the names of movie stars that have played truck drivers, and I think this will blow you away. Clint Eastwood, Sylvester Stallone.
Don't forget about that movie Convoy. That was big.
Christopherson, Norris, Burt Reynolds, Sally Fields, Jerry Reed, Claude Atkins, Gina Davis, Susan Sarandon, Patrick Swayze, Jackie Gleason, James Brolin, Joan Michael Vincent, Ernest Borgnine, Hugh Jackman, aka I Still Call Australia Home, famous Australian, played a truck driver driving road trains. Rip Torn, Melanie Griffith, Kurt Russell, Forrest Tucker from F Troop days. I grew up watching F Troop. Oh, yeah. Liam Neeson, and even Mel Gibson played roles. So there has been a plethora, which is another movie quote from The Three Amigos. I always drop that in there. A plethora of movies that have been made by Hollywood. And of course, think about, when was the last time Hollywood made a movie about truckers? And therein lies why we have a driver shortage. I'm kind of being funny about it, but there's a reason we don't have a lot of people coming to the industry, because we've gone from everybody being kind of fascinated by the trucking industry through Hollywood to the opposite, social media, and everybody pretty much vilifying truckers because they're in their way, or they're just Over the Top. Over the Top was a great movie too. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, Over the Top.
Yeah. So there's at the truck show this weekend, or at the Mid America Truck Show, there will be the BJ and the Bear, Cab Over Kenworth will be there. Probably the original truck from Smokey the Bandit will be there. There's a guy in South Carolina that's got all of these trucks. He's purchased all of these old movie trucks. The truck from Jewel, starring Dennis Weaver, is somewhere.
Oh, Jewel. Yeah, it's a good one.
Jewel. Yeah. So I blame it on Hollywood. And I think I'll wrap up quickly, Ryan. I kind of developed a script in a way for the movie I'd like to see, which is starring Tom Cruise, called You Wanted to Live It When, where he plays a trucker trapped in a receiver warehouse for 36 hours trying to unload his $1 million time-sensitive cargo, resorting to never-before-seen stunts to get unloaded. Who wouldn't want to see that movie?
Yeah, we're about to steal that idea. And
chasing.
And just to add to that, gents, because I'll be fully transparent, I've never heard of any of those movies. And anytime the movie that I think of with a truck driver is Joyride with the late Paul Walker. And it's actually a horror movie. It's a movie about these two gents. They go on a trip on a joyride, and literally they're being like chased down by a villainized truck driver called Candy Cane. So if anybody knows about Joyride, shit over the comments, because that's and it's true though, because it paints the truck driver as the bad guy. So it is crazy to think about.
Yeah, The Rock was in one. He was trying to get his son out of trouble. There was a bit of drug running going on. Dwayne Johnson was in one.
Movies. Yeah, The Rock. Yeah.
What
was that called?
Convoy was a big hit back then.
Huge hit.
That was probably the biggest trucking movie that was out there at that time.
Yeah. I go to a truck show with a guy in Boston who's a 70s and 80 I-95 produce hauler. And they're bad. They're some of those guys are just fascinating. But his handle is the Boston Bandit. So his CB handle is the Boston Bandit. And when you meet him, you could say, yeah, I could see that. you've when he tells the stories of what they used to do, blowing the scales down in Florida and hauling produce. Yeah, very real stuff. He's still got the same W model Kenworth that he used to run. So a lot of these guys will go to truck shows with their original truck from the 70s and 80s that they've rebuilt and sit there and, black dog. So, Antoine, I've never seen a black dog. When you get tired, that was one of the things people said. When you get tired, do you really see a black dog? No, you see all sorts of weird stuff, but never a black dog.
Elephants, pink elephants.
Camels. I've seen a few camels in the outback. One of them was real one night.
Yeah, last point that we're mentioning here is actually Scott bringing up Fast and Furious, and I don't know if you guys remember, but this dates the Fast and Furious franchise. The first movie was about them stealing DVD players. The first scene is them chasing around and stealing. So think about that, from DVD players to we don't even have Blu-ray, we don't have any of that as stuff for all digital now to see the
Beverly Hills Cop.
Yes.
He was selling something out of the back of an LTL trailer.
And he's hanging on to the chains as the thing's going.
Yeah. I watched that again the other day. That's such a funny movie. I loved it. Yeah.
This is amazing. Dean, I got one thing maybe we can look at if there is any data on this period, like in later, but today actually begins Ramadan for all our fellow Muslims, brothers and sisters. And I had a thought thinking here, like they have to fast for the 40 days and eat in the night. Is there any data or anything we can look at, or maybe even talk to Daman if he has anybody who practices Islam? Is there a drop off in maybe drivers taking it off for those 40 days in terms of, hey, we're gonna celebrate it? Or a part of the religion as well says that they're allowed to eat if they're traveling. So it kind of goes into 1A and 1B. But I thought that'd be kind of cool to kind of top provoke maybe in the future or something like that to see.
Yeah, I don't know that I certainly don't have a data point on that, but there would be a data point somewhere. I know regionally we see that around when different countries celebrate Christmas. Some of the Russian folks celebrate Christmas a little bit differently.
Orthodox Christmas. That's later on.
So we definitely see it. We see it in some big freight markets, like the produce markets out of Fresno and the one just north of that, Stockton. We definitely see it impact then in some of those markets where a particular demographic is aligned with a particular commodity and trailer type. So produce and reefer, we definitely see it there on the West Coast.
That's good to know. We can take that. So, Dean, thank you so much. Let everybody know how they can get a hold of you. Tell us about that IQ and the match show next week.
Yeah, look forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's going to be every .IQ Live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. with him and Ken Adamo, who are amazing. And then, like I said, Matt's. It feels like everybody's going to Matt's except for Jeff and I. So I don't know. We got to figure out something together.
Right? We should have went.
Yeah, just as we kind of go from there. So, want to thank everybody for coming out today. If you found value in this, please like, comment, subscribe, share this with your neighbor, share this with anybody that you think that would bring value to them. And we want to thank our corporate sponsor, Daman at Centurion Trucking.
Yes.
If you're a sales agent looking to make a move across North America, they are looking for agents and they're paying up to 60% GP. An amazing company, as you kind of see, always brings value in the comments, and they truly believe in people over profits. Tomorrow we have an amazing episode with another getting back into empowering women into business. And with that being said, Cowboy, take us home, my man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dean, again for another fabulous data day here on Sales Chatter Live. We definitely touched on a lot of points, and I can't wait until next Wednesday when we have a follow-up to see where the market is going and whether we are going in the right direction or probably in the wrong direction that we don't want to talk about. But we'll wait until then. So everybody out there, thank you so much for your support, watching us. Hopefully you learned a little bit of stuff from what we said today. With that said, have a great day. Check us out tomorrow on Sales Chatter Live at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we have another great guest discussing empowering women into business. With that said, have a great day. Audacious Cowboy out. See ya.